The hum of the station's emergency lights flickered, plunging the corridor into eerie silence. Commander Jared Sutherland collided with an alien diplomat, Zara Solari, and in an instant, everything changed. A mysterious device on her wrist, something she never thought would activate, flared to life when their hands touched. Panic set in as the station's systems began to fail. But as they navigated the dark, crumbling halls, the bond between them grew undeniable, pulling them into an unexpected connection. What happens when a human and an alien, from entirely different worlds, find themselves marked by destiny? With sabotage tearing the station apart, Jared and Zara must fight to survive. But will their newfound bond help them, or tear them apart? Don't miss the shocking twist that changes everything. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Jared Sutherland had never planned to be in the diplomatic wing of Orion's Reach. As the chief engineer of the space station, his domain was usually the maintenance halls, the engine rooms, and the grungy corners of the station where few people ventured. He wasn't supposed to be in the pristine corridors of the diplomatic quarter, where only high-ranking officers and ambassadors tread. But today, the station's environmental control system had malfunctioned, and Jared had been called in to fix the mess. He walked through the marble hallways with a steady, purposeful pace, his boots making soft thuds against the floor. His tool belt hung low on his waist, and his hands, rough from years of handling machinery, brushed against his tactical vest. Jared's blonde hair was neatly combed, but the chaos of the day had left him with a faint stubble on his jaw, giving him a rugged, almost careless look. He didn't mind. It was part of his charm, at least that's what his mother always said. As he turned a corner, his mind was preoccupied with calculations. The malfunction was bigger than he'd been told, and he had a long list of repairs to make. He barely noticed the figure ahead of him until it was too late. Without warning, Jared collided with someone. He staggered back, momentarily thrown off balance, but before he could regain his footing, he found himself staring at a woman. She wasn't quite human, at least not in the way he was used to. Her smooth, greenish skin shimmered under the station's artificial lighting, and her silver-white hair cascaded around her shoulders in delicate waves. She was tall, slender, and wore a tight, dark gray suit that hugged her body, emphasizing her elegant yet powerful frame. Her eyes, those eyes, were the most striking feature. A bright turquoise, glowing almost ethereally in the station's dim light. Jared froze, his breath catching in his throat for a moment. He had seen many species during his time on the station, but none quite like her. She didn't just look different. She felt different, like something entirely new and foreign, yet impossibly fascinating. "Excuse me," she said, her voice melodic with a faint echo through the universal translator. Jared blinked, momentarily stunned by her appearance and her calm demeanor. Sorry," he muttered, struggling to regain his composure. "I wasn't paying attention." The woman tilted her head slightly, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her lips. "It's no problem," she replied smoothly, her voice calm but with a faint trace of curiosity. She took a small step back, and Jared noticed a delicate bracelet-like device on her wrist. It gleamed in the light, looking far more advanced than anything Jared had seen in his own world. "I'm Commander Jared Sutherland," he introduced himself, instinctively extending his hand toward her. He had to admit, he was still trying to wrap his mind around her presence. She wasn't like the others he'd met on the station. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before extending her hand. Her fingers brushed against his, and Jared was about to comment on how soft her skin was when something unexpected happened. The device on her wrist, what he had first assumed to be a piece of jewelry, began to pulse with a brilliant blue light. The woman gasped, pulling her hand back in shock, her eyes widening. She made a strangled sound, as if she were choking, her breath quickening. Her gaze fixed on the glowing device, and for a moment, Jared wondered if he had done something wrong. "What's happening?" he asked, confused, his concern rising. He reached out slightly, but she quickly backed away, her body stiff with surprise. "This is impossible," she whispered under her breath, staring at the device on her wrist like it had just come to life. Jared blinked in disbelief, unsure what to say. I didn't think my handshake would be that impressive. The woman's composure, normally so refined and professional, cracked for a brief moment. She quickly tapped at the device with shaking fingers, but it only pulsed brighter. Her breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. Jared watched as she tried to calm herself, her eyes flicking nervously between the glowing device and his face. Is everything all right? He asked, his smirk fading into genuine concern. It's fine, she said quickly, her voice regaining its diplomatic coolness, though her eyes still betrayed her agitation. It's nothing, just a minor malfunction. I'm pretty good with malfunctions, Jared said, gesturing to his tool belt. If it's causing you trouble, I can take a look. The woman hesitated for a moment longer, then shook her head. It's not something you can fix with a wrench, Commander, she replied, her voice sounding more like a calm reassurance, though there was an edge to her words. This is a cultural artifact, very personal. Jared nodded slowly. Fair enough, he said. Still, if it's bothering you, maybe I can help. She looked at him for a moment, then gave a small sigh and tapped the device again. It's called a Soulmate indicator, she explained softly, her voice lowering. My people use it to identify physical and emotional compatibility. Jared raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And it just lights up? Yes, she replied, her voice thick with disbelief. It's never activated before, not for anyone. Jared felt a strange flutter in his chest, a mix of pride and curiosity. So what does that mean exactly? He asked, taking a cautious step closer. Before she could answer, the station's lights flickered. A low rumble echoed through the walls and an emergency alarm blared in the distance, cutting off their conversation. This isn't good, Jared muttered, turning quickly toward the nearest control panel. I need to check the systems. He tapped his communicator. Reeves to control, what's happening? A crackling voice responded. Power fluctuation. Main grid is failing. Backup systems are coming online. Jared glanced back at the woman, Zira, he realized. I need to get to engineering, he said, urgency in his voice. The environmental controls are about to collapse, and the whole station could go down. Zira looked at him, her eyes wide with concern. The diplomatic quarter has separate systems. If those fail too, Jared didn't wait for her to finish. Come with me, he said, his mind already shifting into work mode. You can help me navigate, and I could use someone familiar with the diplomatic protocols. She hesitated for only a moment, her gaze lingering on the device on her wrist before she nodded. Lead the way, Commander. As they hurried down the darkening corridors, Jared couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling him toward Zira. Something stronger than the task at hand. The Soulmate indicator pulsed again, its glow faint but constant, as if echoing the strange connection that had just begun between them. They moved together, through the shadows of the station, both uncertain of what was happening but knowing they had no choice but to face it, together. Jared and Zira moved swiftly through the corridors of Orion's Reach, their footsteps echoing faintly against the cold metal floors. The station's usual hum had been replaced with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional flicker of lights and the deep rumble of malfunctioning systems. As they turned another corner, a low growl reverberated through the walls and the emergency alarms blared again, their shrill sound vibrating through the station's structure. Zira's face tightened, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she said nothing. Jared could see that her diplomatic composure was starting to crack, her nerves fraying from the unknowns of the situation. I wasn't expecting to be dealing with an emergency like this today, Jared muttered, tapping his communicator again. The control room's response was no clearer than before, only a garbled message about power fluctuations and system failures. He cursed under his breath. The whole station's going down if we don't get these systems stabilized. Zira stepped closer, her gaze flicking nervously to the flashing lights overhead. If the diplomatic quarter's environmental systems fail, the consequences will be catastrophic. I need to make contact with my delegation. Jared nodded, his mind racing as he glanced at her, trying to gauge her level of concern. She wasn't just worried about the systems, though. Jared could tell that the growing pulse from the Soulmate indicator on her wrist was distracting her, drawing her attention back to him every time the light flared. A strange feeling of anticipation rippled through him, one that he couldn't explain. He turned another corner, leading them toward the auxiliary control panel located deeper in the station. The dim emergency lighting bathed the corridor in an eerie red glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist as they walked. Zara's glowing green skin shimmered in the low light, and Jared found himself stealing glances at her, unable to ignore the strange pull he felt when their paths crossed. The quiet hum of the station, punctuated by the sudden flickers of lights and the occasional screech of malfunctioning equipment, only added to the sense of urgency. "What's going on with that thing on your wrist?" Jared asked after a moment, his curiosity getting the better of him. He gestured toward the glowing device. "I thought you said it was a Soulmate indicator. But I'm guessing it's not just some fancy bracelet, is it?" Zara's eyes flicked to the device and she touched it lightly, almost absent-mindedly. "No, it's not just jewelry," she said quietly, her voice carrying a faint hint of frustration. "It's an ancient artifact, passed down through generations of my people. It's supposed to light up when a Velunan finds their soulmate, someone they are genetically and emotionally compatible with. It's a sign that the universe has chosen you for someone." Jared frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "So, what does it mean that it lit up for me?" Zara's steps faltered. For a second, her fingers twitching at the device as though trying to make sense of it. "It means that somehow you're the one," she replied, almost as if the words were coming from somewhere deeper within her, something she didn't want to fully acknowledge. "But that doesn't make sense. Humans are unpredictable, irregular." Jared stopped walking for a moment, his mind spinning with the revelation. He had never been one to believe in fate or destiny. He was a man of logic, of machines and repairs. But now, standing in the dim light beside Zara, a deep, unsettling feeling tugged at him. Something had changed between them the moment there. Hands touched, he didn't understand it, but he couldn't ignore it either. "I didn't think much about it either," he said slowly, his voice softer now. "But when I shook your hand, I felt something. It was like a spark, like electricity, running through me. Maybe it was just the weird situation, but I haven't felt like that before." Zara's eyes widened slightly as she turned toward him. "You felt it too?" Jared nodded, but before he could say anything more, the emergency alarms blared louder, filling the corridor with a deep, unnerving sound. The emergency lights flickered again, and the temperature in the corridor dropped by several degrees. Zara shivered visibly, her face tight with concentration. "We need to hurry," she said, her voice now more urgent. "The systems are failing faster than I thought." Jared's instincts kicked in as he picked up his pace. "I'll get us there. Just follow me." They reached the auxiliary control panel in the next section, but as Jared began to work it, the interface, the lights flickered out completely, leaving them in total darkness. Zara's breathing quickened in the silence that followed, and Jared could feel the tension building between them. He had never been so aware of anyone before. Not like this. The connection, whatever it was undeniable. But this wasn't the time to dwell on it. "Zara," he said, his voice low but steady. "Can you see anything?" She hesitated for a moment, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Just the emergency lighting." Her voice was calm but tight. "But the system's not responding. Whatever's happening, it's deliberate." Jared cursed under his breath. "Sabotage." He punched the console in frustration. "Someone's shutting down the station. This isn't an accident." Zara stepped closer, her presence more apparent than ever in the dim light. "Who would do something like this?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't know yet," Jared said, his mind racing. "But we need to stop it before it's too late. Let's get to the control room." They moved quickly, slipping through the darkened halls of the station, following the red glow of emergency lights that seemed to grow dimmer with every passing moment. The temperature continued to drop, and Zara was clearly struggling to stay warm, her breath visible in the cold air. Jared could see her shivering, her hands trembling as she adjusted her suit. He glanced at her, concerned. "You okay?" Zara nodded, though her eyes were filled with a faint trace of worry. "I'm fine. Just not used to this kind of cold. My people don't fare well in low temperatures." Jared's brow furrowed, and without thinking, he reached out to gently steady her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "If you need to take a break, just let me know." Zara looked at him, her turquoise eyes softening for a moment. "Thank you, Commander." "Jared," he corrected, giving her a small smile. She smiled back faintly, her eyes lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. The connection between them, whatever it was, felt stronger with every passing second. But there was no time for it now. They had a job to do, and the fate of the station and the lives of everyone aboard rested in their hands. The auxiliary control panel ahead of them flickered back to life as they approached, and Jared let out a sigh of relief. But the deeper they got into the heart of the crisis, the more he realized that this was only the beginning, and whatever was happening between him and Zara, they would have to face it together. But what would that mean for them both in the end? The air in Orion's reach was getting colder by the second. The emergency lighting now glowed faintly, casting long, eerie shadows down the metal halls. Jared was becoming increasingly aware of the intense quiet, broken only by the occasional rumble of failing systems and the low hum of their hurried footsteps. With every step, the weight of the situation grew heavier, pressing down on him like a thick fog. Zara, walking beside him, was visibly struggling. Her green skin, usually radiant and smooth, had taken on a paler hue in the cold. The delicate shimmer that usually seemed to dance across her body was now dulled, as if the chill was leeching her strength. Jared's thoughts kept flicking back to the glowing device on her wrist, the Soulmate indicator that had sparked to life when they touched. Every time he glanced at it, he could feel a tinge of something building between them, something neither of them had the time or the courage to fully understand. They reached the main engineering bay, where the first signs of serious sabotage were visible. The control panel, usually humming with data and feedback, was now flickering erratically. Jared's mind raced through possible fixes, but each time he tried to interact with the interface, the systems seemed to resist. It was clear. Someone had carefully targeted this part of the station, and they were good. Zara stepped closer, her gaze following his every move. "What do you think is causing this?" she asked, her voice low, though it held an edge of quiet urgency. Jared paused, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It's sabotage," he muttered under his breath. "The systems are being systematically taken down. It's too precise to be an accident." He glanced over at Zara, her face more focused than he had seen it before. She was a diplomat used to dealing with the complexities of intergalactic relations, but this was different. This wasn't negotiation, it was survival. He tapped at the console again, but it sparked with another malfunction. "We're running out of time," he said, his voice tight with frustration. Zara crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. "If we don't fix the power system soon, the whole station will go dark. But we don't know who's behind this." Her voice was calm, but Jared could hear the quiet tension beneath it. "We need to find out who did this and why." Jared glanced at her, noting how she seemed to hold herself together despite the chaos. Her composure was impressive, but Jared could sense her unease. Zara wasn't just worried about the station. There was something deeper, something more personal that seemed to be gnawing at her, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. "Zara," he began, his voice softer now, more serious. "This whole thing, the indicator, the sabotage, it's all connected. I can feel it. You feel it too, don't you?" Her eyes flickered to the glowing device on her wrist, and she took a deep breath. "I do," she admitted. "But I don't understand why it happened. Why now? Why for you?" Her voice was filled with a quiet vulnerability, and Jared could sense the conflict within her. The indicator is supposed to light up when two individuals are truly compatible, biologically and emotionally, but we're different species. I shouldn't be feeling this. Jared met her gaze, the connection between them growing stronger with every word. You're not the only one confused, he said, his voice steady but filled with an emotion he hadn't expected. This shouldn't be happening, but it is, and maybe we're meant to figure it out together. Zara's gaze softened, but there was a brief moment of hesitation before she spoke again. I can't ignore what the device is telling me, and I can't ignore the way I'm starting to feel. She looked away, as if gathering her thoughts. But this isn't something I'm trained for. I was trained to remain neutral, to keep my emotions in check, but this is different. Jared nodded slowly, understanding more than he cared to admit. You don't have to do it alone. We're in this together now. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the failing systems around them. There was an undeniable truth in his words, and Zara's expression softened in response. Before they could say anything else, a sudden crash echoed from down the hallway. The sound was so sharp, so jarring, that it sent them both into alert mode. Jared's hand instinctively went to the small weapon he kept for emergencies, though he wasn't entirely sure it would help in this situation. Stay close, he murmured, to Zara. She nodded, her eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor as they moved cautiously toward the source of the noise. The deeper they ventured, the more the station seemed to fall apart. The lights flickered ominously and the temperature dropped further, making it harder for Zara to keep her composure. They reached a junction where the hallway opened up into a large control room. The air was thick with tension, and the atmosphere felt almost suffocating. A figure moved in the shadows at the far end of the room. Jared's heart rate quickened as he silently signaled to Zara to stay behind him. As they approached, the figure finally stepped into the faint red light of the emergency illumination. Jared's eyes widened as he recognized the face. It was Davis, the assistant director of station operations. Jared had worked with him before, but the man looked different now. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mix of anger and desperation, and he was holding a weapon. Davis? Jared called out, trying to keep his voice steady despite the surprise and mounting tension. What the hell are you doing? Davis sneered, his grip tightening on the weapon. You think I don't know what's going on? He spat. This station's systems are too fragile, everything's too perfect, it needed to be brought down. He motioned toward the control panel. And you're going to help me do it. Zara stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in, though her hand hovered near the small weapon hidden in her suit. This isn't the way, Davis, she said, her voice calm but firm. You can't sabotage a station like this. Lives are at stake. Davis laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Lives? You think I care about lives? This station's just a tool, a means to an end. But now it's a weapon. Jared moved quickly, stepping between Davis and Zara, his body instinctively protective. This has gone too far. Whatever your reasons are, it's over now. Davis's eyes narrowed. No, it's not. It's just getting started. Without warning, he raised his weapon, the energy pulse crackling in the air. Jared dove toward Zara, pushing her out of the way as the shot barely missed them both. The blast hit the wall behind them, sending sparks flying. We need to stop him now, Jared shouted, his voice grim as he took cover behind a piece of equipment. Zara, now more alert than ever, crouched low, her mind racing as she scanned their surroundings for a way out. This was no longer just a station malfunction. This was personal. The tension in the control room was suffocating, the only sound now the occasional crackle of static from the damaged communication system and the harsh, ragged breaths of Jared and Zara. The station's lighting flickered, casting brief flashes of light across the room, and the temperature continued to drop, making Zara shiver despite the layers of her suit. She was beginning to feel the strain of the cold, her body weakening with each passing minute. Jared's hand gripped the small makeshift weapon he'd grabbed from the corner of the room. The weapon was clunky and outdated, but it was all they had. He shifted slightly, peeking over the side of the machinery where he and Zara had taken refuge. Davis had taken cover too, his eyes wild with desperation, his weapon still aimed at the two of them. "Davis!" Jared called, his voice calm but firm, trying to buy time. "You don't want to do this. You're going to destroy everything. The sabotage, the systems failures. It's not just going to affect the station, it's going to destroy lives. It's your life too." Davis's eyes flashed with bitterness. "Lives?" he sneered. "You think I care about that? This station has been a prison, a tool for the rich and powerful to exploit. They don't deserve it. None of them do." Zara's heart clenched. She recognized the underlying bitterness in Davis's voice. It wasn't just about sabotage. It was about revenge, frustration, and a desire to bring down a system that had oppressed him. But it was misguided. What he didn't understand was that his actions could bring even more harm than he realized. Jared took a step forward, his stance defensive but steady. "You're angry, I get it. You feel betrayed, but this isn't the way. You're hurting innocent people, people who don't deserve to suffer for your pain." Davis's grip on the weapon tightened. "Innocent people? You think any of them are innocent?" he spat. "They're all complicit. They all benefit from the suffering of others." Zara stepped forward, her voice unwavering as she faced the disgruntled station officer. "There is always another way, Davis. Violence will only perpetuate the cycle of destruction. Think about what you're doing." For a moment there was a flicker of hesitation in Davis's eyes, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. He raised the weapon again, aiming it at Jared and Zara. "There's no other way, it's already too late." The blast that followed seemed to happen in slow motion, but Jared reacted instinctively, diving towards Zara and pushing her out of the way as the energy blast narrowly missed them both, sending a surge of sparks flying through the air. The heat from the blast scorched the edge of the equipment they had been hiding behind, but they were both unharmed for the moment. Jared's mind raced. They had to do something. They couldn't just keep dodging blasts forever. He glanced at Zara, her eyes wide but calm, focused on the task at hand. She wasn't afraid. She was thinking, calculating. Jared could feel the connection between them building again, like an invisible thread drawing them together. This was bigger than just the station. It was bigger than the sabotage. There was something between them that neither of them could deny anymore. "Zara, we need to move," Jared said quietly. "We can't keep playing defense." She nodded, her voice steady. "I know. We need to get to the main console and shut down the weapon systems. It's the only way to stop him." Jared's eyes darkened with determination. "Then let's end this." They moved quickly, darting from their cover to a new position, using the equipment and debris as shields. Jared's hand grasped Zara's, the familiar warmth of her skin grounding him as they worked together to outmaneuver Davis. The space station had once been a place of routine and familiarity for Jared, a place where he understood how everything worked, how to fix anything that broke. But now, it felt like an entirely different world, a world where chaos reigned, and the only thing he could rely on was the instinctive connection between him and Zara. The closer they got to the main console, the more desperate Davis became. He was firing wildly now, but his aim was sloppy. The temperature continued to plummet, and the walls hummed with the strain of the station's failing systems. It was clear that time was running out, and if they didn't stop Davis soon, the station, and everyone on it, would be lost. Jared's pulse quickened as they reached the control panel. He could feel Zara's presence beside him, strong and unwavering, her hand still tightly gripping his. The connection they shared, no longer just a strange curiosity, was a powerful force now pulling them forward. They had to do this together. "Ready?" he asked, his voice a soft murmur in her ear. Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time since the chaos began, she smiled. Small, but genuine. Always. With a swift movement, Jared accessed the control panel, his fingers flying over the interface. The system was nearly fried, but he could still see enough to know where the overrides were. He punched in the commands, rerouting power, shutting down the weapon systems. The screens blinked, then went dark. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. But then, success. The console hummed back to life, and the lights flickered back on, their steady glow returning to the station. The emergency alarms that had been blaring for what felt like hours finally fell silent. Zara's breath caught in the quiet, her eyes scanning the now stable control systems. "We did it," she whispered, disbelief and relief flooding her voice. Jared nodded, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of the last few minutes. "Yeah, we did." But before they could catch their breath, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. Davis was approaching, his weapon lowered, but his expression still filled with anger. He had seen the systems reboot, and his eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and rage. "You think you've won?" Davis growled, taking slow, deliberate steps toward them. "It's not over yet. There are still bigger plans in motion." Jared stepped forward, his posture firm and resolute. "It is over. You don't get to decide who lives or dies anymore, Davis." Zara moved to stand beside him, her stance just as strong. "The lives of others are not yours to control. Let this be the end of your sabotage." Davis stopped just a few feet away, and for a long moment, the two sides stared at each other, the weight of what had just happened hanging in the air. Finally, Davis lowered his head, the fight draining out of him. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he muttered, his voice suddenly small. "I thought I was making a difference." Zara stepped closer, her voice gentle now. "Sometimes the right thing isn't the one we think it is." Jared nodded, his tone steady. "It's not too late to change, Davis. You still have a choice." The air between them felt heavy, but there was no more tension, no more animosity. For the first time since their unexpected encounter, Jared and Zara stood together, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. But as the station's systems began to stabilize, so too did something else, something deeper. Something between them that neither of them could explain but both could feel. Their connection had only just begun, and despite everything that had happened, they both knew that their journey was far from over. And in that moment, standing amidst the chaos of a sabotaged space station, surrounded by the hum of reactivating systems and the soft glow of the Soulmate indicator on Zara's wrist, Jared and Zara shared a quiet understanding. They were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were something more.